Hello, everybody, and welcome to the November edition of Let's Talk. Brought to you about a week later than I would have liked it to be, but that is because I spent the first week of this month under the weather, and I'll talk about that in a second. I usually try to get these Let's Talks recorded on like the 30th, 31st, or 1st or 2nd of the month of at the very latest, and then try to get it out that first week, but not this time. I'm recording this on the 8th because I spent the first 6, 7-ish days of this month sick. And when I say sick, really it was just like 2 days where I was completely knocked out. The rest of it was me just kind of milling around the house, trying to avoid people and quarantining and whatnot while everything wore off, because I caught COVID. I caught the thing that I had been managing to avoid up to this point for almost 3 years, but finally caught up to me. And yeah, it wasn't fun. It wasn't fun. I mean, it wasn't like a super egregious case. It was like a high fever and then just the most unbelievable, like I can't even describe it, levels of fatigue where, I mean, I think I slept for 16 hours straight at one point. It was so bad. But once the fever broke, I got all my energy back, and for the most part, I was all right. I just kind of ended up sitting around wondering what to do while I, again, quarantined and tried to avoid anyone that I actually gave a crap about. So was just kind of stuck in the house for several days. And because of that, I was under the weather. I wasn't really able to get much recorded, so instead I took the time to edit a bunch of stuff, schedule a bunch of stuff. I actually got 50 episodes of No Man's Sky and Pokemon combined. No Man's Sky, Pokemon's Legend Arceus, both of those edited and scheduled. I think I did like 15 of the former and then like almost 40 of the latter. It was a lot of stuff that I was able to get edited, which was good, but really wish I could have taken that time and recorded stuff, but I digress. Today, before we get into the meat of today's episode, I want to talk about a slightly different approach that I'm going to be taking for these Let's Talks from now on. They're still going to be kind of these unscripted rambling messes, but I do want to kind of put to bed the whole game industry news and discussion side of these videos from here on out. They just don't really fit in. I would like to make these Let's Talks more of just channel updates, monthly channel updates from now on. I have other ideas for including such a discussion in other formats, but I'm still working on those, and I don't know exactly how I want to make it work just yet. In fact, I'll even talk about some of those ideas later on today, but as of right now, in these Let's Talks, no more game industry discussion, no more current events, no more news, none of that stuff. This is just going to be, these are just update videos from here on out. I do have a lot to talk about this month, though, because this month itself is not going to be very eventful. It's more about looking towards the future. There aren't going to be any new series this month. Forza Horizon 3 ends at the very end of the month, and then Ghost of Tsushima comes back on, I think, December 2nd or 3rd. One of those days. But this month, nothing's really changing. Just variety content, Subnautica Below Zero, No Man's Sky, Horizon Forbidden West, Forza Horizon 3, and Pokemon Legends Arceus, and it's going to pretty much stay true for a while now. Let's start today by talking specifically about the two I was talking about before, Legends Arceus and No Man's Sky, because that's what I spent the majority of October focused on. And I have a lot of thoughts about both of those series now that I've recorded so much of them. We're going to start with No Man's Sky because that is I would say, the highest profile project on the channel at the moment, even though it's, out of the 5, probably the one I've put the least amount of effort into. And that's not to say that I haven't been trying with it. It's just that it's a little bit frustrating, and that's what I want to focus on today. No Man's Sky, I don't know what it is, man, why so many people are happening across the series. I guess No Man's Sky just does wonders in the search algorithm, but people are watching that series more than any other, and a lot of people that aren't even subscribed to my channel, which I think is funny. But No Man's Sky, it's a great game. It really is a great game. I am enjoying it a lot. It's not the game's fault at all that I'm having these this change of heart that I would like to talk about. It's more to do, well, it is the game, but it's more to do with the format. No Man's Sky is, like I said, it's a fantastic game, but No Man's Sky is, in essence, it is an exploration game that is propped up by a handful of systems. And each of these systems is very specialized. It's very open-ended. A lot of people like to lump No Man's Sky in with live service games and the like, and that's very much true. But in a way, No Man's Sky is both, it's the grindiest and also least grindy of these sorts of games that I've ever played in different ways, if that makes sense. It's one of those things where it's like No Man's Sky starts you out, and you just kind of go for a bit. You explore, you take in all your sights and surroundings, and then you hit a point where you realize this is all the game has to offer as far as exploration is concerned, and then you go, okay, what are the systems? And then you start to explore each of the different, and I'm not talking like the planetary systems, I'm talking about the gameplay systems. No Man's Sky hits you with each of its gameplay systems one after another, and then after it lays them all out for you, it goes, all right, which one are you most interested in? Do you want to focus on right now? And you can, stay on one gameplay system and just work on it for a while, and then you can move on to another one when you get bored of it, and that's kind of the gameplay loop, right? You're like, okay, well, right now I just kind of want to do some nanite farming and stuff like that, and unit farming, and just accruing all of this cash so that I can level up my gear and whatnot, and level up my ship and stuff like that. And then you hit a point where like, okay, well, now I want to play around with the settlement system, and I'm just going to focus on that for a while, and I've got multiple settlements that I can work on, and those are going to get me background cash and things like that. Well, now I want to work on the freighter system. It's things like that. You're jumping between these different systems, but those systems, as deep as they are, it means that once you've explored them all, you've kind of seen everything the game has to offer, and at that point, it's whether or not No Man's Sky can continue to hold your interest. And for me, it's absolutely holding my interest. The problem is, this channel and every playthrough I do, while not all of them are necessarily Let's Plays, they all at least mimic Let's Plays. That's just kind of what I do here. I've always been about the commentated playthroughs on this channel, no matter what it is. And because of how open-ended No Man's Sky is, it feels like, while I do think that the game is way deeper than it used to be, it does feel like it's like a lake that's very wide in all directions, but not very deep, if that makes sense. I feel like I'm showing off what the game has to offer, and if I go any further than that, it's just tedium, and it's not exciting at all. And again, I don't think that's necessarily a problem with the game itself, because it has its own type of appeal. But when I'm trying to make an interesting playthrough series, and I'm trying to go over everything the game has to offer and explain those things, I feel like once I actually get a grasp on something, then I have to move on to the next thing. I can't stick with that thing for a while because it's not interesting to stick with it, at least from a video format, because so many of those systems require time and a lot of grinding, which grinding is not for everybody, and it doesn't necessarily make for interesting video content. This is in contrast to something that I play like, Destiny, which, while is also an incredibly grindy game, it has so many different things and so many different pieces of content to tackle before you ever hit that grind that it is so much easier for me to make hundreds of videos on that game before I ever get to the point of, okay, well, I'm not going to show this because this is going to be me doing the same thing over and over for hours. No Man's Sky, you hit that point like 20 hours in. Destiny, as long as you explore the entire breadth of the game's content, you can actually avoid hitting that point until 100 hours in. And I'm serious when I say that. And I enjoy No Man's Sky. I'm liking its gameplay loop. I just don't like the video format, the video series format. So I've recorded No Man's Sky up to, I think, episode 27 as of right now. After I hit that point, episode 27, because I've gotten to the point where I know I have all the nanite and the unit farms in place. I've dabbled with the freighter system, I dabbled with the settlement system, and I'm going to dive into those a little bit more deeply in future episodes. But I've hit the point with No Man's Sky where I'm thinking, I'm just going to continue through the main quest all the way to the very end, and then I think we're just going to call it with this series, because I don't think it has... I don't think there's enough depth to keep this series going as long as I would like it to. I mean, if I wanted to be as pedantic and as, I guess from a nicer standpoint, be as detailed as possible, I could absolutely make this series go on for hundreds of episodes. But to me, it doesn't really have that much of a reach, which is why I'm probably going to call this one after like 50 at the most. So that's just something to keep in mind as we continue with this series, that it's a really good game, but it is not a very good YouTube playthrough game. In fact, would be if I streamed on Twitch, this game would be so much better suited for something like that, where I could have the active interaction with chat and people could like tell me, oh, but you can do this and this and this, or oh, you're missing out on this in real time, as opposed to my current video format where, I'm sorry, I can't read a comment and then record a video the next episode the day of. I just can't do that on this channel. It doesn't work that way because, I have so many other series that I'm working on all the time, and this is a hobby. This is not something I do full time. I've got other obligations to worry about, so this is just kind of something that always takes a back seat to everything else that's going on. And I can't just pick up the mic and record something at the drop of a hat. It just doesn't work that way around here. So, like I said, I'm really enjoying the game, but don't expect to see No Man's Sky last for too much longer. I would expect it to be done around February, possibly March at the latest, before we move on to the next thing. Now let's talk about Pokemon Legends Arceus. So, there's not a lot to say about this one. It's going strong. I just wanted to clarify that Pokemon Legends Arceus, like any other Pokemon game, obviously has an endgame. But in Legends Arceus' case in particular, that endgame is incredibly and heavily intertwined with the things that happen in the main story, because the main story kind of ends almost abruptly with that game. It doesn't have a whole lot of finality to it. It leaves a lot of things open-ended. And because of that, I am not going to be taking my usual break. Like usually with games, when the credits hit, I usually take a break before I jump into additional content. Granted, I didn't with Forza Horizon 3 this year, so I can't really say that. And I also didn't with my Pokemon Emerald Let's Play either, but I have in the past. Like Ghost of Tsushima is a good example. Finish the game. We're saving the expansion for later. That starts in December. But with Pokemon Legends Arceus, I want to clarify that when the credits roll, we're jumping right back into it. We're not going to be stopping. We're not going to be taking a break from anything. We're not going to be milling around. No, we're going right back into it and going until that game is done. Until I have completed the Pokedex, I have done the absolute, or I have basically explored the breadth of all of its content, and I'm satisfied with the conclusion of that series. So that's pretty much all I wanted to say on that. So expect Pokemon Legends Arceus to go for quite a while longer. It's probably going to be pushing 70, 80 episodes before it's all done. It's quite a hefty series. And obviously, right after Pokemon Legends Arceus is done, we're going to be jumping into another Pokemon game, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, but that is something to keep in mind. Now, before I go over, the far future, stuff December 2023, etc., I want to talk about this month in particular, the things I'm going to be working on. I'm going back into my variety content this month. I'm going to be doing variety content on two separate occasions. In fact, this week, I'm going to try to be recording a bunch. What I essentially did for this next batch of variety content that I'm recording, and you probably won't see most of these videos until next year, but you'll get a couple of them this year as I shuffle episodes around and whatnot, because they're obviously once a week. But this week in particular, I'm going to be jumping into lots of modern games. In fact, what I did is I went onto my PlayStation 5, and I have a lot of extra space for PS4 games on the thing, so I just went in and I downloaded like 20 different games. And I'm just going to kind of shuffle through all of those and decide what I want to record at any given moment. And then we're just going to look at those, and those are going to be kind of, like I said, spliced in between the stuff that's already been recorded. But later on in the month, I'm going to try to sit down and specifically focus on some retro stuff. I'm talking Super Nintendo, Genesis, Nintendo 64, and PlayStation 1, and pretty much nothing newer than that. I'll try to go over a bunch of those, and that should hopefully include a lot more games I remember, as opposed to the usual let's have a look at, which I know can be a little bit get a little bit more stale from time to time. So I'm going to be working on those this month. I'm also going to be jumping back into Horizon Forbidden West, because I'm actually starting to thin out on those videos. I'm probably going to be out of episodes for that by I would say the middle of December. So I got to get a lot more of that recorded. There's still so much of that game left to be done. But yeah, that's going to be a big focus for this month. And aside from that, pretty much the only other thing I'm going to be working on this month in particular is I'm going to try to take a stab at those tier list videos. We're going to see how those end up working. I don't know if it's going to be amazing right off the bat. I've already given it a couple of shots, and I haven't really been happy with the results, but might start working on those relatively soon. I think that'll actually be a good place for game discussion and discourse as well, so I would like to be able to do that at some point. We can start adding those in on different time slots and whatnot. And it'll be relatively harmless, just kind of fun content that doesn't need to be taken too seriously, while also sometimes having some interesting game discussion, or at least I would hope. So let's talk about December real fast. There's two things I want to focus on for the month of December, and we'll talk about it more obviously in next month's Let's Talk as well. But first things first, Ghost of Tsushima, like I said, it comes back. It's the Iki Island expansion with a couple of things that I missed in the main game. It's very, very little, but like maybe about an episode and a half's worth of stuff that I missed in the main game that we're going to be taking a look at. But then we're jumping into the Iki Island expansion, playing that thing to completion. I mean, and when I say completion, I believe I did everything in that expansion that you could possibly do. And I want to say I recorded just a hair under 30 episodes for that. I haven't actually gotten a full count yet, because I haven't even started editing those yet. But I want to say it was around 27, 28 episodes of that series before it's all said and done. So that one's good to go. It should turn out pretty good, I would hope. The only notable change with it is I recorded the entire Let's Play on the PlayStation 4 edition. I was able to upgrade to the PlayStation 5 edition for this portion of the Let's Play, so you'll get a slightly better visual experience in the process. And I also recorded it on this microphone, the very same microphone that I'm using right now, because, that was basically the series where I took this thing for a test run. So that is actually one fear of mine, is that the audio isn't going to turn out all that great for that series, because that was that whole week that I recorded it was my first use of this microphone in particular. And there's been some growing pains with this thing. It's definitely different from the old Blue Yeti I used to use, but it is a better microphone at the same time. So I think I've more or less got it down pat at this point, but I don't know. We'll have to see how it turns out for Ghost of Tsushima. I might have to work some editing magic to make that series salvageable. We'll see. I really hope that it actually turned out all right. But the other thing that's going to be coming in December, which is every December of every year, is the end of the year. We look back, the year in review. Sometimes I'll do a top 5 or a top 10 list. And I believe last year, did I do top 5 last year? I actually can't remember. I've already completely lost track at this point. But every year I usually like to look back on things, whether it's good or bad, and just talk about the games that came out this year. I'm not doing that anymore. This kind of goes in line with what I've wanted, the shift in focus that I've had on this channel over the past year and a half or so. I don't want to make a video praising all of the games that came out in 2022 and only the games that came out in 2022, because as I have said before, I'm pretty disillusioned with the game industry these days. I'm not its biggest fan. I think that while video games themselves are amazing, the industry that makes them is horrible. Like really, really, really horrible. And while would be nice to praise some of the good ones out there, in good conscience, I just can't do it. So instead, when I jump into, the year-end stuff, we are going to instead be taking a look at the channel in 2022 as opposed to what games actually came out. And there will be a little bit of overlap because obviously I did cover a couple of games that came out this year on the channel. So here's how it's going to go. I'm going to do a top 10 games list, but this top 10 games list is not going to be games released in 2022. No, this is going to be my top 10 games that I played on the channel this year. And you might be thinking, that's pretty easy to narrow down. I mean, you've only done 7 or 8 series this year. How did you even manage that? This is going to include everything I've looked at, from let's have a look at games I remember I've always wanted to try, the Let's Plays I've done, the playthroughs I've done, from Outer Wilds to Kena Bridge of Spirits to Horizon Forbidden West to Forza Horizon 3 to even I'll probably not include Ghost of Tsushima because I did the proper game last year, but everything that I've looked at on the channel this year is fair game. And if you want to know how many games we've covered up to this point, as of the recording of this video, I have looked at 45 games on the channel this year, and by the time that the year is over, that number will have passed 50. And that actually makes things a lot more interesting because I will be able to actually sit down and talk about my thoughts in more detail on what I think were the 10 standouts, because not every single one of them, obviously, is going to be things that I did a full playthrough. Most of them will be, but not all of them. On top of that, I'm going to then, besides the top 10 list, kind of go over, or make another video where we kind of go over all of the other games that I took a look at, and I'm able to give a little bit more in-depth thoughts on those things, the more notable, interesting games, because, I haven't been looking at a lot of these games on a total whim. It hasn't been absolutely random from start to finish. Every game I ever look at on this channel, I do so with a purpose, because someone somewhere has said that basically every game I've looked at this year is great, amazing, or even a masterpiece of some kind. And I don't know if I necessarily agree with those people, but all of these games have received that high praise in some estimation in my experience before. And that's why I have been looking at all of them. And that's going to continue to be the theme from here on out, going into 2023 and beyond. Like I said, I don't look at these games just because. There's a couple where it's like, yeah, okay, that looks like an interesting play right now. But almost all of them I have heard from somebody somewhere, this game is a masterpiece. And I get curious, and I want to see why, because in my opinion, while there are a lot of good games out there are a lot of them, more than enough to play in an entire lifetime that have already been released, there are not nearly as many, I wouldn't say perfect games, I'd say like games that you would rate a 9 out of 10. There are not nearly as many, but there are still so many of those that why bother wasting time on anything less than that, in my opinion. That's the way I see it. You should never settle for mediocrity or even above average stuff. You should try to only play or enjoy things that are legitimately fun, legitimately great. You should try to always keep your standards and raise the bar as high as possible when consuming entertainment, in my opinion. And that's kind of the underlying goal from now on this channel. Whether it's showcasing the stuff that I already think is really good and I love, like Forza Horizon 3, Forbidden West, Pokemon Legends Arceus, Subnautica, things like that. It also includes the games and stuff that I haven't tried, and I want to look at those as well. And we'll make passing glances at things that aren't all that good. Great example of that, Greg Hastings Tournament Paintball Maxed. It's a janky game, it's glitchy, it's aged poorly, it's not very good, but it's fun. It's an incredibly fun, like, 6 out of 10 game. And, like I said, we'll pass on by some of those kinds of series and take a look at them every once in a while. That's what the point of Games I Remember is. But for the most part, on this channel, I want to focus on the great stuff, and I want to give them all the time of day. I want to give them a pass. I want to see how good all that stuff is before I make any judgments. And these 2 videos are going to be kind of the conclusion to 2022's story. They're going to be, here's the best stuff, and here's the rest of it. And those are going to be the focus of December, besides working on the next Pokemon game, which I'll talk about in a second as well. Those are going to be that, Ghost of Tsushima, and then those 2 videos are pretty much going to be my focus in December. And then we move on into 2023. Now, going into next year, I would like to more or less keep the same schedule that I've had going for the past little while. I'd like to have the 2 concurrent Let's Plays, I'd like to have the 2 other playthroughs going, and I'd like to have the 1 day reserved for variety content. That's at least the goal. I mean, I don't know if I can sustain that the entire year, but I would like to at least try. So that's, going forward, when it comes to the series that I'm working on, that is the plan. But in particular, there are 3 games that I want to make 2023 the main focus of. This year, it was Forza Horizon 3, Horizon Forbidden West, and Subnautica. Everything else was just kind of by happenstance. Even Legends Arceus, I wasn't planning on going into until I beat it and finished it in like February, and I realized, okay, no, I have to do this. But those 3 games, those other 3 games I named, Subnautica and the 2 Horizons, those were the focus of 2022 from the very start of the year. Going into 2023, I also have another 3 games in mind. It is Destiny, which I've already talked about multiple times. I'm going to be getting back to that in January. It is Pokemon White, which that is going to be the next Pokemon game. And the last one is Animal Crossing. Now, here's the funny thing. I actually don't know which Animal Crossing yet. I'm floating between 2 choices, and that is City Folk and New Horizons. The former of which, I mean, obviously City Folk doesn't have as much going on in it as New Horizons, which is one part of what could be the struggle, but it's also, I think, the most underrated Animal Crossing. New Horizons would be the obvious choice because, 1, that game actually has a sequence of events that you need to go through to get to a certain point, making it much more Let's Play friendly. And unfortunately, it doesn't have a lot of long-term lasting effect, but I can go pretty far before we run out of stuff to do, essentially, with that game. That's a game that's incredibly meaty. City Folk would be much more of a challenge to make into something interesting, but I would still like to give that game the time of day at some point. I know I've given Animal Crossing a try multiple times in the past, particularly the GameCube edition, and it just hasn't really panned out, but I am committing to it in 2023. I would like to get an Animal Crossing series going next year at some point. And when I say at some point, it's probably going to be the series that comes after Horizon Forbidden West, which means that it's going to be a ways out. But that, Destiny, and Pokemon White are going to be the hallmarks of 2023. That is my goal. And I'm starting on Pokemon White next month. I'm starting on Destiny in January. And Animal Crossing, again, we'll see, probably a little after, probably around February or March. So I'll be working on those. Everything else, we'll see. I will obviously play it by ear. A No Man's Sky or a Kena Bridge of Spirits could just pop up out of nowhere and take its own time slot for a while, or I could just stick to the plan and go over the series that I actually mentioned. I think it was in last month's Let's Talk, or maybe it was the one before that, where I said I have a certain sequence in order. I still do. I absolutely do, but those are obviously just going to, things just kind of come up every once in a while, and you can't plan out absolutely everything because you'll only be disappointed and or surprised at every single possible turn, and I'm not going to make any promises in regards to other series, but at least in regards to Destiny, Pokemon White, and Animal Crossing, you can definitely expect those in 2023. Destiny probably even beyond 2023 because, oh my gosh, I probably have... let's just say I have 3 digits episodes worth of stuff to cover to add on to the Let's Play that's already nearly 200 episodes long. So that'll be fun. That'll be fun. But that's enough for today. Thank you all so much for watching. I need to get this thing edited so I can actually get it out in a somewhat timely manner. I need to get some gameplay recorded for it too, probably, which I think I'll do right after this. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.